Hello, I'm Chris Willis, Chief Marketing Officer of Outseer. Today, we're talking about the psychology of scams and specifically why stopping scams requires more than simply detecting suspicious activity. Banks and financial institutions have more technology, more data, more fraud signals than really ever before, and yet scams continue to grow. That raises an uncomfortable question. Are we only solving part of the problem? Because scams don't succeed only because of a transaction looking risky. They succeed because a person has been influenced emotionally, psychologically, and often over time to believe that making that payment in that moment is the right thing to do. There's a job description for fraudsters, and it's about manipulation. It's about psychology. They use urgency, authority, trust, fear, hope, social proof, and pressure to move people towards a decision. So, if we want to stop scams, we have to understand what's happening in the customer's mind at the exact moment of the transaction. Now, that's what today's conversation is about. I'm joined by two outstanding experts for this discussion. Pete Staffell, behavioral scientist and former bank fraud specialist, and Yuri Abraham, managing director of the Global Anti-Scam Alliance. And together, we're going to talk about what financial institutions can do differently and what a more behavior-led approach to scam prevention could look like. Now, if you have questions throughout this, please drop those questions in the chat. We're here to answer. Pete, Yuri, thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Lovely to be here.
So let's just kick this off. Let's set some stakes. We have better fraud tech right now than ever before, and scams continue to rise. Pete, why are banks still losing to scammers even when all the technology is available to help?
Yeah, so technology spots, psychology stops. Without both working together, then we're always on the back foot, and fraudsters are experts at that psychology. They're experts at finding something that we need or we feel compelled to do: love, belonging, financial gain, fear. And if we're not bringing psychology into the conversation and maximizing it throughout the life of a scam, then we're definitely going to be behind.
So, Yuri, let's look at it from Goss's perspective. How big is this problem globally, and are things getting better or worse right now?
Unfortunately, they're getting worse. We do a survey amongst 50,000 consumers every year, and based on that survey across more than 40 countries, we estimate that the amount being lost in scams is somewhere between 442 and 1,000 billion US dollars, which is a gigantic amount. And I think, unfortunately, things will only get worse. I mean, we have AI, but as Peter was saying, scammers are also getting better and better at social engineering. So, unfortunately, we're just at the start.
Pete, what are scammers doing better than banks when it comes to influencing people?
There's three things actually that I call out, Chris. So first, they know their targets inside out. They are obsessed with who they are dealing with and how to get inside their heads. Second, they're pushing the boundaries of tech and people power. So the hybrid of great technology, but still people at the heart, pushing those boundaries. And the third thing is that from a psychology perspective, they blend tactics amazingly well. They're not rolling out tired, cliched hooks. They are crafting very compelling and often over multiple stages over time, very compelling messages and interactions.
So let's walk through this as a journey, right? From unaware to fully trapped, and understand what's happening in the customer's mind. Let's start at the pre-attack stage. I've got that up on the screen. Talk a little bit about this pre-attack stage.
So this journey, so life of a scam or this attack chain, we have these four main stages. Right at the start, you have someone who is totally unaware of a scam. They're not interested in that investment. They're not searching for a purchase. And also the psychology from a scam perspective is this is not relevant to me. There's a whole host of other psychological reasons why We might not feel that scams are relevant or are needed. For example, we might be overconfident in our own ability to spot a scam. In practice, they're far harder than maybe we appreciate. But bottom line is that stage, very little education, campaigns and other stuff is going to get through in the day-to-day. It's just not relevant.
So Jorij, why is this a weak point? Why is pre-attack, a weak point for the process, and what's actually working at an ecosystem level?
um, Again, based on the survey we do every year, we see that 73% of the global population is confident that they can recognize scams. So in general, humankind believes it will not happen to me. I'm too smart. It has nothing to do with being smarter. I really believe everybody can get scammed, and we know that everybody gets scammed. I mean, as you know, Chris, we have a tradition at our summits to always scam the audience, who
Mhm.
are practitioners, who are experienced cybercrime and fraud specialists. And yeah, we always succeed in scamming part of our audience from their credit cards, their personal information, etc. It's just being with the right message at the right time, then you can scam a person.
Absolutely. I mean, it is going back to what Pete was talking about. It's that overconfidence, and especially with what you're talking about right now, the audience, the 600, 700 people in the audience at a GASA event, overconfidence is the definition. Like, it's not going to happen to me. I'm here at a anti-scam conference. I know how to deal with this, and you can still get them because there's a psychology to this process.
Yeah.
Pete, talk to me a little bit about the victim compromise.
So at this point of compromise, we've got two layers to this. So there's passive. So for example, a fraudster has access to your data. They are trying to get hold of you. You're unaware. Active is someone is actively considering. So someone's out there on social media, they're in Insta, they are in the market for some kind of investment, or they are looking for a job. They are actively considering. Now, the most important thing to pick out with this stage, particularly for the active, if I start there with the active considering phase, this is an opportunity from an intervention perspective. We've now got relevance. If we craft something that's compelling, hopefully more compelling than the scam, we've got relevance, we've got the chance of getting some interest. From a passive perspective, this is where someone's unaware, protecting, minimizing the need for a decision is so important. So we talk in the paper about screening technology and that kind of thing. That still has an important role in, from a behavioral perspective, stop the decision if you possibly can. And where the decision happens, make sure that it's designed and compelling and created in a way that's going to work.
Sounds pretty straightforward, but as it turns out, it's not that easy. Jorij, why is this the hardest moment for banks to intervene?
Um, Partly because it's not in their space. I mean, we see scammers now also using AI to massively bombard us with fake ads, fake emails, fake text messages. And the problem is we have been educating people with simple rules. If it's too good to be true, it probably is. Scammers know that. So in shopping scams, they no longer advertise the Apple iPhone with a 50% discount. No, it's a 1 or 2% discount, because then you're just the cheapest and you end up at the top. Same with investment scams. They're very professional, and a normal person cannot differentiate a AI generated banking website from a real banking website. So of course, consumers still have a responsibility, but we cannot make the consumer responsible for recognizing scams anymore. It's too difficult, and all the old rules, but also the new rules. I mean, you now have the three fingers in front of your face to check if something is a deepfake video. That rule worked 2 months ago. Scammers are already solving the free finger problem. Back to you, Chris.
I mean, and that leads us into, now we're on the backside of it. We're in post scam, and trying to avoid the continuation of what's happening. Pete, talk a little bit about the post scam stage.
Yeah, for me, this is such an important stage that can be overlooked. There's some great work out there, but someone who has been scammed is extremely vulnerable and likely to be scammed again. I know there's some great statistics that I'm gonna steal your thunder to hear, which is was it 40% that you found of in your study? A massive chunk of people who have been scammed once will go on to be scammed again.
Re-victimization.
And so this is clearly from a managing, protecting people, keeping people safe. There's an imperative there to support them. We'll talk about how. But obviously, again, from a financial institutions perspective, if you want to keep your customers safe, this is a place to pay attention. I mean, one of the areas when we look at how to help individuals who have been in this situation, things like providing social support and not just advice, but dealing with the root cause of why someone was in Facebook looking for investments in the first place, dealing with isolation and a whole host of other stuff, which can be done by some great agencies, NGOs, charities, and linking up, funding them, working with them. There's some really good examples of how financial institutions can help in this space too.
So, Jorij, I mean, to that point, this is, there is your data. What is the most effective way to prevent re-victimization?
I think the banks have a big role to play because the bank can see the transactions. I mean, for the record, it's not easy. I mean, we know that. I mean, Peter was already saying scammers are great marketeers, but they're also great social engineers. And we know that they're telling people who are getting scammed, okay, the bank is going to call you in the 15 minutes. They don't want you to make a profit. So if they say, are you sure you want to make the transaction? Just say, yes, I know this, I want this. So they're very good at manipulation. And maybe one case, I don't know, Chris, if we have time enough, but I once was called by an old lady from Norway. She told me she lost 700,000 euros. And she called me because she asked, "Are you, George Abraham, helping me to recover my money?" And I said, "No, ma'am, I'm not in contact with you to recover your money. I think some scammer is using my name to scam you again and taking more money from you by helping you to recover your money." And after a very long conversation where I tried to convince her to call the police, call her friends and family to help her, she said, "Okay, thank you. I'm going back to the other George and discuss this." And that's how good they are. So
Yeah.
I really believe that banks have an important role to play and really freeze accounts or say, "Madam, you are being scammed. We're going to reach out to you with support." There's a big role to play for banks.
It's a hard role though, because this is
Yes.
a voluntary transaction. This is your authorized fraud. I'm saying this is my money. I want to move it, and
I
how
know.
do you make that intervention? It's a tough decision. So let's talk about that. If there's if there's multiple stages of psychology across this journey, there's got to have multiple stages of intervention. Talk us through the two fundamentally different ways banks can be intervening.
So in the paper, we've tried to simplify what is a very complex world. So we've got the world of real-time intervention, as we're calling it, which is very short, snappy, often tech-led interventions that might be at the point of need. So let's say a very targeted ad in social media through to transaction interventions of something in an app during a payment, but very short, very limited time to make an impact. And this is, again, trying to create some kind of simplicity, but without oversimplifying. That's the last thing we want to do. Shape is the kind of methodology, the model that we've applied to try and describe those kind of very short real-time interactions. Shape is led by being specific, and this is the theme, I'd say, throughout the paper. So I talked a little earlier about how amazing, annoyingly amazing fraudsters are getting specific about their targets. Now, for us, from an intervention perspective, we can do the same. So, for example, going beyond, talk to me about investment scams and how do people fall into investment scams. But instead, let's talk about the kind of individuals. So, what was their need in the first place? Why were they there? And you start to come up with very different motivations. So, let's pick two, and let's pick investment scams. So, someone is, I've got in my mind the Emile the Seal FCA ad, which is another case study. There's a brilliant persona in there, which is youngish, someone who's on the up, hasn't got a massive amount of money behind them, and is desperate to improve. They have a higher risk appetite. Compare that, with someone who is on the verge of retirement, lower risk appetite, is a little bit worried that they're going to have enough money to survive, but different motivations. Their behavior is going to be different. The things that are going to entice them, that are going to get them interested, are very different. The fraudsters know this, and they craft their messages accordingly. We need to do exactly the same. So this brings us into hook. So fraudsters, again, are the masters at creating something that's going to hook us in, turn $800 into 8,000 in a month. You can drive a car like me. All of that kind of very, very compelling stuff. But there's great evidence, there's great examples and case studies that we share in the paper where we can do similar, where we can use things like novelty and excitement to draw someone in, to change what we're showing to someone, so it doesn't become wallpaper. Making those hooks is compelling. So what you're showing here, this is a really good example from Monzo, which I love. So this is one example. They regularly iterate, they regularly improve the messaging that they're putting in an app at the point of payment. So this is an example from a little while ago. I like it because it has a very compelling hook. It's something that uses novelty. It doesn't look like lots of other things in their app. It doesn't look like a standard warning that they'll see on their phone, and certainly not in Monzo. That's the hook. There is some novelty there. As we start to go into the more of the detail for shape, so another critical part is activate. So where Monzo do that well, and activate is about going deeper. This isn't trying to do a massive unpick of someone's brain. It's trying to stimulate a little bit more engagement, to go beyond the pure hook, the interest and the attention, to turn that attention into some active consideration. If we go back to the example with Monzo, what Monzo are doing here is something called threat salience. So they have tuned this message to be more specific to that particular payment this person is making. They've identified a level of risk, and because of that, this feels far more personal and far more relevant. The threat is much more salient to me. I'm more likely to interact. It's not perfection, but Monzo demonstrated that this made a measurable difference in the number of scams that they were preventing. So that activation, and there's many different ways of doing that. Again, we talk about a number of those in the paper, but many different ways that we can use our own psychology to create greater engagement.
So, Jorij, do you see these types of interventions scaling across the industry, or are they just still isolated?
We see more and more banks doing these kind of things. I mean, limiting transactions, asking, hey, you're suddenly wiring a very large amount to a very different bank account than you usually do. So yes, these are being picked up. Of course, it can always be more and faster. I think the next wave will be across the sectors. I mean, telecom operators have a lot of information, and they're more and more willing to share that information about, okay, who is actually on that mobile device? Where's that mobile device actually located? That can help the bank to make a better decision. But the banks can also see where the money is going, and then see, hey, and then tell the social media, hey guys, this is a scammer. Stop the advertising of that ad on your platform. So it's very important that banks take more and more preventive actions or intervene if they really think the transaction is very, very likely a scam, like is now happening in Singapore. The police is able to block the account. The next wave will be that we, across all the sectors, start to share more information in real time to better identify the scammer or take down its assets.
Perfect. I mean, now I think the next thing is to move beyond real time and look at more of an in-depth intervention. So I've dropped that on the screen. Pete, tell us a little bit about how we go more in depth.
So we had, Jorij, you shared a case study earlier. So someone who was deep into a scam, and if we pick some of the kind of psychological factors that might be going on in that situation, it's way beyond things like urgency and fear. This is if we pick a romance scam, and some of those that I've seen, and people who've been targeted that I've spoken to, it's about belief. It goes right to the core of who they are, their own sense of self-worth. Things like this are going on. I mean, beliefs are they're hard to change. They rewire our brain, and as soon as someone else starts to attack, we defend those beliefs. So if we are attacking, if we put ourselves in that situation, people are raising their guard, and it creates enormous challenge. So I mean, I suspect a number of us in this room have spent time with those that have been targeted, and they've shared stories where loved ones, people who were close to them, tried for days, months, often years to try and change. I spend a lot of time reading reports, and where I can, speaking to people who've been targeted. I've just been reading one where the son was sharing a story of a romance scam where he's been trying for a year to unpick the influence of this scammer. Now, what STEP is trying to convey, and by the way, all of these models are based on some really good behavioral science. A COMBI is a great example of a model out there that's been really useful, and some evidence-based work too, from my practice and from some other amazing case studies. And what STEP's trying to do is to create an environment where we're not the baddies, where we're not the adversaries, where we're not attacking. So again, being specific is at the heart. This anchors everything. So in this case, for example, someone in the middle of a romance scam has ended up with your bank, has had thank goodness the payment has been spotted, there's something suspicious, and is talking to your contact center. At that point, to have the insight that says what has happened to that individual so far, what have they interacted with, what have they done in the app journey, what maybe before, what else do we know about their situation, their transactional history. All of that stuff is so important to support the person in the contact center and make sure they can have the best possible conversation. So that's the being specific. And there's 3 other layers beyond that. Now, trust, it may feel kind of obvious that you want someone in your contact center to be trustworthy, but it's beyond that. Fraudsters are again the masters at many things, and one of them is building trust. To unpick days, hours, sometimes maybe days, months, a year of influence, which is based on a massive amount of trust in that scammer, we have to try and be even better. We often have moments. So in times when I worked and trained contact centers, we had moments to unpick those scams, but still it was possible to, through showing genuine interest, through showing genuineness, through establishing similarity, to be honest, through using the same kind of tactics that fraudsters would use to create to create some kind of relationship. Then the last 2, evoke, and to make sure that you're helping them create their plan and not creating a plan for them. Evoke is about using something in particular, techniques like motivational interviewing. So encouraging reflection, asking questions. I'll use a specific example. So a romance scam that I was involved with was someone who, in fact, a lot of the same traits that we've discussed before. So a family member had been cut off, ostracized because they'd been trying to unpick the scam, trying to explain what was going on. Been going on for months. Had been through all of the different banks' journeys to try and unpick the scam, and was now with probably the third person in a contact center. And after all of that, by the way, all of that matters. So part of layering their journey and making it work together, that matters. What came before matters. But at that moment, the question that made the difference was, after establishing trust, spending time, tell me, is there anything that's given you pause? Is there anything that hasn't felt quite right? This is your story, you're in control. I'd love to know what you think. At that point, the individual started talking about, it was someone who's pretending to be a doctor. They started talking about when they tried to go and find them, they'd actually gone to try and find the hospital and they hadn't been there. Now, at the moment it'd been dismissed, the fraudster had come up with an amazing excuse, and it was months since it had been smoothed over. But that moment, that was the opportunity to say, well, I still think about it. Tell me something else that's maybe hasn't felt quite right. And she opened up. Now, that one question, it was not the only thing that made the difference, but it was a linchpin that opened up her own doubt and built on all of the great work that had been done by others, by her family beforehand. But it needed something to break the dam for something to come out. And sorry, I'm speaking too much, but the last thing, their plan is the most important bit. So to turn an intent into action from a behavior perspective, it's rarely enough to say, right, just go away and sort that out, then block them, whatever. Talk about the thing. What are you going to do next? Let's talk about the thing that's the best thing that you can do right now that's going to help keep you safe. And what's the thing after that? So a very clear, credible plan that's got nice, easy steps to follow, rather than a loose, ambiguous, let's try and make this right.
So, Yuri, where is Gaza seeing banks succeed or fail with these approaches in the real world?
I see two. I recently spoke to several banks about this topic, and maybe let's start with where they're failing, and not failing because the intention is not right. The intention was great. A very large bank told me that in the transaction, when they have doubts about that transaction, they ask, why do you want to who are you transferring this amount? Is it family or friends? Is it somebody you have met for a long term, face to face? Is it somebody you met on the internet recently? If they type in the last one, recently met on the internet, the bank blocks the account. And he said that is not working, because what people do is they start a transaction again and then they pick the other alternatives. They will just lie to the bank to get the transaction through. What I hear, and I love to hear Peter's opinion on that, is two other banks told me, one is time. Start a discussion with the client and say, what's the rush? I mean, this investment opportunity is also there tomorrow. Why don't you take some time to think about it? Let's call again tomorrow. So if you are able to convince the person to take time, scammers don't like that. And that's something you can play with. Why is he pushing for this? I mean, what's the rush? And the other tactic, family and friends. I mean, as a bank employee, you've never spoken face to face to that person before. It's the first time. The scammer has been, as you said, Chris, been talking maybe for months to the victim. Maybe there's even a romance going on. So, I mean, people you love, you trust. So one of the ways is seeing, can you hook up? Can you tell them to have a chat with your brother? Or, oh, you have a sister. Why don't you discuss this with her? But Peter, maybe you have other ideas on how can we help people make the right decision, because in the end it's indeed their decision.
Twists on both. George. So on the last one you gave, so going to speak to a friend or family member, that can work. That may make a difference. The other twist on that, to bring step back, is if a family member was coming to you right now saying, I'm going to invest £2,000 in crypto because someone I met on Facebook said that was a good idea, what would you say to that friend? What would you say to your family member right now? And this is kind of a something called distancing, psychological distancing. So instead of all of the hang-ups and the attachment and the belief that you have attached yourself to this particular person and to the scam, you're somehow detached, you're freed from that. And sometimes that distance helps to give a different perspective. And another sort of twist on that is, so talk me through how would you get them to check? What kind of steps would you take? Well, I'd be trying to find out if their profile was real or not. So how would you do that? And etc. etc. So to give them that prompt, the questioning, the moment to consider something in a different way with less attachment. So the other side of things, the giving time. There's another reason that I really like that question, which is, what's the urgency? Because often it gives an insight into why they're doing it in the first place. So this is really urgent because if I don't do this, I've heard Trump's going to make an announcement tomorrow and I'm going to miss my golden opportunity. Okay, tell me about that. So who's telling you this? I need to do this right now because I wasn't supposed to tell you this, but there's fraudsters in Santander and they're going to take my money. So to get, that's two examples. It might not always work, but to get to the root of why they're doing this in the first place, their motivation, asking questions can sometimes do that.
And I think to the point, and as we move into sort of the next section of this, of why warnings fail, I mean, that's what you're touching on. Everybody in this audience, primarily built out of people from financial institutions, has added warnings somewhere in their process. And why don't those warnings work? What's happening?
So there's a number of different ways. To pick a few, we're oversensitized. We see warnings on our phones on a hourly, minute by minute basis. Things pop up in our browsers, emails tell us off. There's too much, so we get desensitized to what's out there. I think there's also from a warning perspective that so there's the desensitization side, but it becomes wallpaper. It becomes something that is relevant to other people. It becomes a habit to click through. And once habits are built, we're no longer considering anything that's in front of us. We're just on autopilot. So there's loads of reasons why warnings don't work, and why warnings alone can be a really poor way to change behavior. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be using opportunities where we have people's attention to try and change and to try and give them a different way of doing things. How we present that, how we make it compelling is the key.
Well, and it's the sensitivity of how you try and break that spell. I mean, let's continue with romance scams. We've been talking about them for a bit, and in talking to victims in this space, the things that always strikes me is, like, it is not uncommon for me. I believe that I am in a relationship with my wife, and if she needs me to move money from one of our accounts to another one of our accounts, I do that. And in talking to victims, it is not unlike that. They they have been manipulated into believing that they are in a relationship that they think is as real as the one that I just described. And so when they're asked to send money to an account, we look at it as like, you're dealing with a scammer. How do you not know that you're dealing with a scammer? But they're looking at it as, my boyfriend asked me to send money. Like, why wouldn't I do that? And why do you think that is weird? And we see signals. Technology sees signals, like that bank account and where it is and the size of the transaction and the way that it's being moved and all the things that we can identify. But how you deliver that news, that's the hard part, right? Because if you just say, hey, that account is in a country that your boyfriend isn't in, like, right, I have an answer for that. I'll just ask him. Like, that's weird, but cool. I'll ask. And it's not just overconfidence. It's that this doesn't apply to me because my situation is completely different because this is real. I said at the beginning, there's a job description for scammers today. And you don't think that. Like, people think like, there's people that are very technical and smart that solve problems, and then there's scammers on the other side. But no, scammers are masters of manipulation and psychologically adept, and they know what they're doing, and they've built this process to create this trap. And so, you know, how do you break free of that? And I think, Yuri, do you think that consumers actually believe in a lot of cases that they're at risk, like whether it's romance or other scams? It's always someone else, right?
I really think that's exactly one of the big problems we're going to face more and more because, Chris, I mean, I have your voice. I can make a message, and I probably am able to figure out the phone number of your wife. And I'm very curious if I can convince her to wire money to my account. And as I said before, the fact that at every of our summits we can scam people, and those are not the most sophisticated scams. So I really think we will get more and more into the situation that the consumer could not have a way to find it out because the scams are getting too good. And therefore, I find it also very important, and that's what Gaza does, is connect across all the sectors to see what we can do, what the scammers can do less, is really work across all the sectors. So to real-time exchange signals across the sectors, and also have conversations with governments, because I think banks should be able to freeze accounts if they really think this is really not good. But yeah, at the moment, in most countries, it's not allowed. So there are many improvements necessary by working across the different sectors, because yeah, it's too easy to scam people, and it's not their fault.
Nope. So let's make this actionable. Folks are listening to get ideas of what they could be doing right now. Let's create a new operating model. If Pete, if you had to redesign scam prevention from scratch, what does the framework look like?
So there's 3 or 4 things that my operating model would have, and going back to the paper, the case studies we've shown and brought to life do really, really well. So I think the first is technology, clearly vital, leverage, as fraudsters are doing, as much as possible to spot, to identify, but behavioral science is there with some great design, some great interface design and other methods to make it land. The other is data and analytics. So talked a lot about being specific. So if we've got amazing signals, amazing data on the customer, what they've done, what might be motivating them, to use that, combine that dynamically to create interventions that are much more specific and much more tailored, again, just as the fraudsters are doing, just as influencers are doing out there, being hyper targeted, then we should be doing that. Making that data work as hard as it possibly can. I think the other thing is end-to-end. So a lot of those that I've worked with can be a little siloed. So this is the payment intervention activity that's governed by a different set of laws, a different team. It's got different branding, and then you've got, it drops into the contact center, where institutions are thinking end-to-end, right from before the thing happened, before the payment happened, at the point of intent, through the payment, and crafting that using good service design, which I really believe in, to bring those different moments together, to have some kind of consistency and to have data flowing between them end to end. That's going to make a massive difference. The last one, we didn't cover it in the shape bit, but something that I believe in a great deal is to prioritize what we are asking customers to do. So it's really tempting to try and bombard customers with information. The thing you really need to know right now is to check their profile, reverse image search, check the reviews, etc., etc. Instead, say, what's the one best possible thing this person, this customer can do right now that's going to keep them safe? So, for example, I'm investing, do not invest, go on the FCA, register if you're in the UK, FINRA if you're in the US, go onto that register, check out the contact details, not there, contact details don't match, don't invest. One simple behavior that's going to maximize the chance they're safe. So those are the things that I'd have.
So, Jorij, I mean, you talk to through GASA, telco, social, law enforcement, and banks. What needs to change across that entire ecosystem to make this work?
I think two things. One is in many countries, and for the record, privacy is a good thing. But in many countries, companies do not dare to exchange information due to the privacy legislation. And I think we need to find a new balance there. Privacy is very important, but fighting crime is also very important, and both are protecting the consumer. So one of the things we are working on is a kind of safe harbor, so that it's very clear for companies under these conditions, I can share information with my fellow with my fellow banks, or even across sectors, to better identify risky transactions, or better help law enforcement catch the scammer. And that's one of the crucial things we're working on. And then the other is companies, and I really think that changed a lot in the last year. More and more companies are feeling the responsibility to act more to protect, and especially banks. Um, but it also pays, because I mean there was a recent study in Australia. People who are banks who are protecting their customers from scams are rewarded by those customers staying on board. If a customer gets scammed and the bank could have intervened, he leaves. So there's also a clear, very blunt. There's an ROI to help your consumers, help your clients stay safe. Apart from the fact that it's also the right thing to do.
Excellent. Let's take this out. Pete, 2 or 3 practical takeaways.
So on my mind, I have, I talked about targeting and being specific. I've got one there. I've got one about being bold and safe. And then I've got one about taking inspiration from everywhere. So let's do it in reverse. So taking inspiration from everywhere. In the paper, we go across the whole life cycle of a scam. It can be tempting to go, just tell me about the payment intervention bit. But there's some fantastic learning that may help make great payment interventions earlier on in the chain, and maybe later even with post-scam, with the step, the kind of evoking, questioning kind of techniques that might work there. So take inspiration from everywhere. The second one I've got is to be bold, but you can still be safe. So to give an example, sometimes it can be tempting to temper designs for reasons like branding. So we might go, that's lovely, Pete. I'd really like it to be compelling, to hook them, to grab them, but it needs to look like this because this is our branding. And or there might be a compliance or a risk view, which is, that's great, but we think from a regulatory perspective, we have to cover this, this, and this. The answer might be, okay, but it's probably not going to do the job. So you can be bold, you can push the boundaries, but you can still be safe. The case studies that we've got in the paper demonstrate that you can push and you can still be safe. Then the targeting. So this is slightly geeky, but I'd say enormously valuable and important. Being specific does not mean that we need to go to the ends of the earth to create a million personas that might categorize every kind of investment scam and then every possible scenario underneath. Start somewhere. So that might be picking the most harmful scams, investments, romance, targeting based on your customer base and your data, those that seem to be being targeted most, and starting there. Be more specific with them and build. So that kind of layered approach to building up what could be a very, very valuable tool.
Jorij, final thoughts.
I mean, I have no doubts, unfortunately, that scams are going to get bigger and bigger due to AI, due to the fact that we see organized crime is seeing this as a great way to do business. It's virtually, it's low investment, chances of getting caught are nearly zero. So organized crime is picking this up more and more. We're seeing, and of course, we also have geopolitical developments, which will not make it easier to catch the scammer in the future. So we fear that scams are really going to get bigger and unfortunately also better. So you cannot make the consumer responsible for recognizing all those scams. You as a bank need to be on top of it to see, monitor what's happening and take more and more actions. So I think that's also the call I want to do to banks. You have a responsibility, but there's also a clear return on investment because it really helps to keep your customers. And I think the ones who in the future are the banks who are the best at protecting you from scams will also be rewarded for it.
Excellent. Okay, guys, thank you so much. This was a fantastic discussion. And thanks to everybody that's joined us today. If there's one takeaway from this conversation, it's that scams are ultimately battles over behavior, right? Detection matters, signals matter, technology matters, but prevention succeeds or fails at the moment a customer makes a decision. The institutions that get ahead of this problem are going to be the ones that combine strong intelligence with behaviorally informed interventions and coordinated human response across the entire scam cycle. If you want to learn more about what we're doing in this area, we have a book. We've been talking about it. We've referenced it several times. It's The Psychology of Scams, written by Pete, and with additional content from banks and consulting organizations. This is a great asset. We will drop the link into the sidebar. Again, thank you very much for joining, and have a great rest of your day.